The killer clown hiding in plain sight. The sun was setting over the quiet suburban streets of Elmwood Heights, casting long shadows across neatly trimmed lawns and white picket fences. It was an ordinary evening in this unassuming American town where life seemed to move at a slower pace. The air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass and barbecue smoke, mingling with the distant sound of children laughing as they played in their yards. But beneath this serene facade lay a chilling secret that would soon unravel the lives of everyone who called Elmwood Heights home. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? At precisely 7:45 p.m., Emily Carter, a local high school teacher known for her cheerful demeanor and dedication to her students, decided to take her usual evening stroll through the neighborhood. She often enjoyed these walks, finding peace in the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft glow of porch lights illuminating the path ahead. As she turned onto Maple Avenue, she noticed something unusual: a clown standing by the side of the road. His presence felt out of place, almost surreal against the backdrop of suburban normalcy. He stood there silently, his face painted in exaggerated grins and frowns, holding a bouquet of balloons that swayed gently in the breeze. Emily paused, unsure whether to approach or continue on her way. There was something unsettling about him, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Her instincts told her to keep moving, but curiosity got the better of her. With a deep breath, she mustered up the courage to ask if he needed help. The clown simply smiled wider, revealing rows of unnaturally white teeth, and shook his head no. Emily nodded politely, feeling a shiver run down her spine as she resumed her walk. Little did she know, this encounter would be etched into the memory of Elmwood Heights forever. Across town, Detective James Monroe sat in his dimly lit office, poring over case files late into the night. A veteran of the force, Monroe had seen his fair share of crime scenes, but nothing could have prepared him for what awaited just beyond his jurisdiction. The walls of his office were adorned with plaques and commendations, reminders of a career dedicated to justice. Yet tonight, his mind was preoccupied with a series of strange disappearances reported throughout the county. Each victim shared one eerie detail: they had all been last seen near a figure dressed as a clown. Monroe leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as he tried to piece together the puzzle. The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. Something about this case gnawed at him, a gut feeling that told him this wasn't just some random string of events. It was deliberate, calculated, and terrifyingly close to home. He reached for his coffee mug, taking a sip of the now cold liquid before letting out a heavy sigh. This investigation would require every ounce of his experience and intuition. Meanwhile, back on Maple Avenue, another resident, Mark Thompson, a retired firefighter with a penchant for storytelling, spotted the same clown while driving home from the grocery store. It was around 8:30 p.m. when he slowed down to get a closer look. Unlike Emily, Mark didn't feel compelled to stop. Instead, he felt a creeping sense of unease wash over him. The clown's eyes seemed to follow his car as he drove past, locking onto Mark with an intensity that made his skin crawl. By the time he reached his driveway, his hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Mark hurried inside, shaking off the encounter as best he could. But as he settled onto his couch, flipping through channels on the TV, he couldn't shake the image of that clown from his mind. Was it possible that someone was using such a harmless disguise to mask sinister intentions? Or was he just being paranoid? The questions swirled in his head, leaving him restless and uneasy. As the days passed, whispers spread throughout Elmwood Heights. People began to notice more sightings of the mysterious clown, always lurking in plain sight yet somehow remaining elusive. One morning, at exactly 6:15 a.m., Lisa Martinez, a young mother juggling 2 jobs and raising 3 kids, encountered the clown outside her daughter's elementary school. She was dropping off lunchboxes when she saw him standing under the playground slide, surrounded by discarded candy wrappers and confetti. Her heart raced as she quickly ushered her children into the safety of the building, vowing never to let them out of her sight again. Lisa's story sparked panic among other parents, leading to increased security measures at the school. Teachers conducted emergency drills, reminding students to stay away from strangers, especially those dressed in peculiar costumes. Despite these precautions, fear continued to grow, fueled by the knowledge that the clown remained at large, taunting the community with his unpredictable appearances. Detective Monroe finally received a breakthrough when forensic analysts discovered traces of DNA on a balloon found near one of the disappearance sites. The evidence pointed to a man named Walter Hayes, a reclusive artist who lived on the outskirts of town. Known locally for his eccentric behavior and elaborate art installations, Hayes had always kept to himself, avoiding social interactions whenever possible. When questioned by authorities, he initially denied any involvement, claiming the balloons belonged to a performance art project gone wrong. But further investigation revealed disturbing details about Hayes' past. Neighbors came forward with stories of hearing screams emanating from his property late at night. Others recalled seeing strange vehicles parked outside his house, their occupants always wearing masks or costumes. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to fall into place, painting a grim picture of a predator hiding in plain sight. On a chilly autumn evening, Detective Monroe led a team of officers to Hayes' residence. Armed with search warrants and tactical gear, they approached cautiously, aware that they might be walking into a trap. Inside, they discovered a labyrinth of rooms filled with haunting artwork paintings depicting twisted versions of circuses and carnivals, along with countless photographs of unsuspecting victims captured moments before their disappearances. In the basement, they uncovered the most chilling evidence yet: restraining devices, chemical supplies, and personal belongings belonging to the missing individuals. Among them was a journal detailing Hayes' warped philosophy, explaining how he viewed himself as both entertainer and executioner. To him, the world was his stage, and the people of Elmwood Heights were merely actors in his sickening play. As news of Hayes' capture broke, the town erupted in a mix of relief and outrage. Residents gathered in public squares, sharing stories of their encounters with the killer clown and mourning the loss of loved ones. For many, the revelation brought closure, but it also left scars that would never fully heal. Life in Elmwood Heights would never return to its former innocence, forever altered by the darkness that had once walked among them. He was the perfect dad while secretly a serial killer. Every morning in the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, John Harper would wake up at exactly 6:00 a.m. The sun would be rising slowly over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the rooftops of the small community. He would stretch lazily, glance out his bedroom window to check the weather, and then proceed with his daily routine as if nothing unusual lay beneath the surface. Pause here for effect. John was known around town as the epitome of fatherhood, a man who always seemed to have time for his two children, Emily and Michael. He coached Little League Baseball on weekends, volunteered at school events, and even organized annual picnics by the lake just outside of town. His wife, Lisa, often joked that he was too perfect, but her laughter carried no hint of suspicion. After all, John had built an impeccable reputation over years of living in Willow Creek. People admired him, they trusted him, and yet, there was something hidden beneath the calm exterior, a darkness so profound it would eventually shake their world to its core. It started innocently, enough or so it seemed. On Tuesday mornings, after dropping the kids off at school, John would head to the local diner for breakfast. It was part of his charm. People loved seeing him interact with others in the community. He'd chat casually with the waitress about the weather or ask how someone's dog was doing after surgery. These were moments where John thrived, basking in the warmth of being liked, respected, and seen as trustworthy. But those Tuesday mornings also marked the beginning of a paterno routine that went unnoticed by everyone except himself. At precisely 8:15 a.m., John would finish his meal, pay the bill, and drive down Route 47 toward Pine Ridge Forest. This stretch of road was familiar to many locals, a scenic route lined with towering pines and wildflowers during springtime. However, few knew what lay deep within the Foresta secluded cabin owned by John under a pseudonym. To anyone else, it might appear to be nothing more than a weekend getaway spot. But to John, it served a much darker purpose. The first incident occurred one crisp autumn afternoon when Jessica Thompson, a 23-year-old barista from the neighboring town of Maplewood, disappeared without a trace. At the time, no one connected her vanishing to John. After all, why would they? He was busy helping organize the Harvest Festival back in Willow Creek, smiling warmly at neighbors while handing out pumpkins to excited children. Yet behind closed doors, John harbored secrets only he could comprehend. Jessica's disappearance went largely unnoticed for weeks until another young woman, Amanda Carter, vanished just 3 months later. Again, the timing coincided with one of John's trips to Pine Ridge Forest. Each victim shared similarities. Both were in their early 20s, both worked service jobs, and neither had close ties to Willow Creek. These details made them easy targets, almost invisible to the communities they left behind. Lisa never questioned her husband's whereabouts. She assumed his frequent visits to the cabin were related to work stress or simply a need for solitude. John worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm in the city, commuting twice a week. When asked, he explained these getaways as necessary breaks to clear his mind. Who could argue with that? He returned home each time looking refreshed, ready to resume his role as the loving family man everyone adored. But the truth simmered below the surface like a pot left unattended on the stove. Inside the cabin, John meticulously documented every encounter in journals filled with chilling precision. Dates, times, descriptions, it was all there, written in neat handwriting that betrayed none of the horror contained within. Some entries included Polaroid photographs, capturing moments frozen in time. Others held newspaper clippings about missing persons cases, carefully cut out and pasted alongside corresponding notes. As months turned into years, the bodies began to pile up, not literally inside the cabin, but scattered across various locations throughout the region. John took great care to dispose of evidence, ensuring nothing could ever point back to him. One body was found buried near a riverbank, another beneath a layer of leaves in a remote clearing. Each discovery sent ripples through the community, though none directly impacted Willow Creek. That is, until the day everything changed. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening in late spring. John arrived home later than usual, claiming traffic delays due to construction. His clothes were damp, his hair disheveled, but otherwise he appeared normal. What neither he nor anyone else realized was that a witness had spotted him earlier that day, leaving the area where Rachel Moore, a college student from nearby State University, had last been seen alive. Her car was discovered abandoned along a desolate stretch of highway, keys still in the ignition. Detectives investigating the case noticed peculiarities in the timeline. Surveillance footage showed a silver sedan matching John's vehicle passing through toll booths at suspicious intervals. Phone records revealed calls placed from his mobile phone near the location of Rachel's disappearance. Still, without concrete proof, authorities hesitated to act. John remained untouchable, shielded by the very persona he'd cultivated so carefully. Until Emma Hayes came along. Emma was different from the others. A journalist with a keen eye for detail, she moved to Willow Creek seeking inspiration for her next big story. Instead, she uncovered patterns linking several unsolved disappearances to the same geographic region. Her instincts told her there was more to the story, prompting her to dig deeper despite warnings from colleagues to let sleeping dogs lie. One fateful afternoon, Emma followed a lead to Pine Ridge Forest. Armed with little more than determination and a notebook, she ventured into the woods, following faint tire tracks until she stumbled upon the cabin. At first glance, it seemed ordinary an old wooden structure surrounded by trees swaying gently in the breeze. But as she approached, curiosity turned to dread. Through the window, she saw shelves lined with items that didn't belong. Clothing, jewelry, personal effects belonging to women whose faces haunted newspaper headlines. Shaken but resolute, Emma snapped photos before retreating to alert law enforcement. Within hours, SWAT teams descended upon the property, surrounding the cabin while negotiators attempted contact via loudspeaker. Inside, John sat calmly at the kitchen table, journal open before him. For once, his composure faltered slightly as sirens pierced the silence. He knew this moment was inevitable. When officers finally entered the cabin, they were met with a scene straight out of nightmares. Evidence of multiple murders lay scattered throughout the space, each item telling a tragic tale of lives lost. John surrendered quietly, offering no resistance as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. As he was led away, his expression remained neutral, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside. Back in Willow Creek, shockwaves rippled through the community. How could someone so seemingly ordinary commit such heinous acts? Neighbors gathered in hushed groups, struggling to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the reality now unfolding before them. Lisa, too, grappled with disbelief, her world shattered by revelations that defied comprehension. During subsequent trials, prosecutors painted a portrait of calculated depravity. Testimonies from forensic experts, psychological evaluations, and countless documents unearthed from the cabin painted a disturbing picture of a man driven not by impulse, but by meticulous planning. Jurors listened intently as stories unfolded, their faces reflecting varying degrees of horror and sadness. Ultimately, justice prevailed. John Harper received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, his crimes exposed for all to see. Yet questions lingered long after the verdict was read. Could signs have been missed? Were opportunities overlooked to prevent tragedy? In the end, answers eluded even the most seasoned investigators. Today, the cabin stands empty, its existence serving as a grim reminder of human capacity for evil masked by appearances. Willow Creek has healed, though scars remain etched deeply into the fabric of its history. And somewhere far away, Emma Hayes continues her pursuit of truth, driven by the belief that understanding darkness can help illuminate light. The serial killer who taunted police with puzzles. The sun was setting over the sprawling city of Portland, Oregon, casting long shadows across its quiet neighborhoods. It was a chilly evening in late autumn when Detective Mark Thompson arrived at the crime scene for what would become one of the most perplexing cases in American true crime history. The air carried a faint scent of damp leaves and pine from the nearby forest, but it was overshadowed by an eerie tension that clung to every corner of this small suburban street. Detective Thompson had been with the Portland Police Department for over 2 decades, and he'd seen his fair share of gruesome crimes. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited inside the modest home on Maple Avenue. As he stepped through the front door, marked now with yellow police tape, his eyes fell upon a chilling Saita puzzle piece lying innocently on the kitchen counter beside a handwritten note. "Welcome to my game." It read, signed simply as The Architect. It wasn't just any puzzle piece. It was part of a larger jigsaw puzzle depicting a serene countryside landscape. This single piece seemed out of place amidst the chaos of the crime scene. A young woman named Emily Carter lay lifeless in her bedroom upstairs, her body discovered earlier by neighbors who grew concerned after days of no contact. Her death appeared to be a homicide, though the method remained unclear at first glance. What made this case different and terrifying was the cryptic message left behind by someone who clearly enjoyed playing games with law enforcement. Detective Thompson's mind raced as he surveyed the room. He paused momentarily, taking in the details before him. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting either Emily knew her killer or they had gained access using some other means. On closer inspection, he noticed subtle clues scattered throughout the house. Another puzzle piece tucked under the couch cushion. Yet another resting near the windowsill where sunlight barely filtered through drawn curtains. Each piece bore a number etched into its surface zone, 2, 3, and so on. This isn't random, Detective Thompson muttered to himself, furrowing his brow. Whoever did this is organized, and maybe even enjoying themselves. As the investigation unfolded, more victims emerged across different states, all connected by similar patterns. In Seattle, Washington, there was Daniel Reeves, a college professor whose apartment revealed identical puzzle pieces alongside cryptic riddles written in red ink. Then came Rachel Monroe in San Francisco, California, whose murder coincided with a series of mathematical equations scrawled on her living room walls. Each victim left behind fragments of a greater mystery, each clue seemingly designed to taunt investigators. The media quickly dubbed the perpetrator the Puzzle Killer, a name that sent shivers down the spines of millions nationwide. Television news anchors speculated endlessly about their motives, while online forums buzzed with theories from amateur sleuths trying to crack the code embedded within these enigmatic messages. Was this person seeking fame? Revenge? Or perhaps something far darker? One fateful morning, Detective Thompson received an anonymous letter delivered directly to his office. Inside was another puzzle piece accompanied by a typed note. "You're close, detective, but are you smart enough?" Beneath those words sat a complex diagram resembling a maze filled with numbers and symbols. Thompson studied it intently, feeling both frustration and fascination bubbling up inside him. Whoever this killer was, they possessed not only intelligence, but also a deep understanding of human psychology. He reached out to Dr. Jonathan Hale, a renowned forensic psychologist based in Boston, Massachusetts, hoping to gain insight into the mind of such a calculated individual. During their phone conversation, Dr. Hale explained how serial killers often leave personal signatures in their work, much like artists leaving marks on canvases. "This person doesn't want to hide," Dr. Kov. Hale said thoughtfully. "They want us to find them, eventually." Dr. Hale suggested focusing on behavioral patterns rather than physical evidence alone. By analyzing the sequence of murders along with accompanying puzzles and notes, investigators might uncover hidden connections between victims or perhaps even predict future targets. Armed with this advice, Detective Thompson dove deeper into the case, collaborating closely with teams from multiple jurisdictions. Months passed, and the trail led them to Chicago, Illinois, where a new victim named Michael Grant was found dead in his penthouse apartment. Alongside him lay yet another set of clues, a partially completed crossword puzzle, a deck of cards arranged in peculiar order, and a voice recording containing whispered instructions meant only for detectives working the case. "Solve me," the recording repeated over and over again, each syllable dripping with menace. Detective Thompson felt the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. Lives depended on solving this intricate web of deception spun by a master manipulator. Yet, despite countless hours spent poring over evidence, answers continued to elude him. Then came the breakthrough, a seemingly insignificant detail hidden in plain sight. While reviewing surveillance footage from a convenience store visited by several suspects prior to committing their crimes, Thompson noticed something unusual. All individuals wore gloves during transactions, except for one man whose hands trembled slightly whenever he handled cash. That nervous tick became the key to unlocking everything else. Further investigation revealed the suspect's identity: Andrew Cross, a reclusive mathematician living in Denver, Colorado. Cross had spent years crafting elaborate scenarios designed to test the limits of human intellect and morality. To him, killing wasn't merely about ending lives, it was about creating art through chaos. When questioned, Cross exhibited little remorse, instead relishing the opportunity to explain his methods. He described himself as a conductor orchestrating symphonies of fear, each note carefully chosen to evoke specific reactions from both victims and pursuers alike. His obsession with puzzles stemmed from childhood experiences involving unsolvable mysteries posed by his estranged father, whom he idolized yet despised simultaneously. Cross ultimately confessed to all murders attributed to the puzzle killer, providing detailed accounts of his actions while challenging authorities to prove his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Trials ensued, capturing national attention and sparking debates regarding mental health treatment versus punitive justice measures. For Detective Mark Thompson, closure didn't come easily. Though Cross was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, questions lingered long afterward. Had they truly understood the full extent of his depravity? Could others still operate undetected under similar pretenses elsewhere? And most importantly, why does humanity seem drawn toward darkness masked as intellectual pursuits? The Hotel of Horrors run by a serial killer. The sun was setting over the small town of Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. It was a typical evening in late October, when the crisp autumn air carried with it the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from distant chimneys. The town itself seemed almost picturesque until you reached the edge of its charm, where an old motel stood like a forgotten relic of another era. This wasn't just any motel. This was the infamous Willow Inn, owned by a man named Harold Kane. Harold had always been a peculiar figure around these parts. He rarely spoke to anyone outside his immediate circle, which consisted mostly of employees who came and went as quickly as they could. Locals whispered about him behind closed doors, their voices dropping whenever someone mentioned his name. Some said he was reclusive because of some tragedy in his past, while others speculated that there was something darker lurking beneath his calm demeanor. But no one dared investigate too deeply, at least not until it was too late. It all began innocently enough. Tourists would check into the Willow Inn during their travels through the region, lured by its affordable rates and convenient location near the highway. At first glance, the place didn't seem so bad. Sure, the paint on the walls was peeling slightly, and the carpet smelled faintly of mildew, but for weary travelers looking for a place to rest their heads for a night or two, it sufficed. What they didn't know was that each room held secrets far more sinister than any visible wear and tear. One particular evening, a young couple named Alex and Emily arrived at the inn after a long day of driving. They were planning a road trip across several states and needed somewhere to stay for the night. When they pulled up to the building, the neon sign flickered above them, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she stepped out of the car, but she brushed it off, chalking it up to the cool autumn breeze. Harold greeted them at the front desk, his smile polite but mechanical. His eyes darted back and forth between Alex and Emily, taking in every detail of their appearance before handing over the keys to room 12. As they walked toward their room, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder but saw nothing unusual except for the darkened windows of other rooms lining the hallway. Inside room 12, things felt even stranger. The furniture looked mismatched, as if pieces had been collected randomly over time. A faint, musty odor lingered in the air despite the window being open. And then there was the bed. The mattress sagged unevenly in places, making it uncomfortable to sit on. Still, tired from the journey, they decided to call it a night. But sleep did not come easily for Emily. Every creak of the floorboards outside made her jump. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard muffled screams, though she told herself it must have been her imagination playing tricks on her. Finally, just as dawn approached, exhaustion won out, and she drifted off to sleep. When morning came, Alex woke up alone. Panic set in immediately as he searched the room for Emily, calling her name repeatedly. There was no answer. After searching thoroughly and finding nothing, he rushed downstairs to confront Harold at the front desk. The innkeeper appeared unfazed by the frantic accusations, calmly explaining that Emily might have left early without waking Alex. Yet something about his tone didn't sit right with Alexa, hint of amusement perhaps, hidden beneath layers of feigned concern. Days turned into weeks, and Emily remained missing. Local authorities investigated but found little evidence linking Harold to her disappearance. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed Emily entering the inn but never leaving. Meanwhile, reports of similar incidents involving other guests began surfacing, painting a disturbing pattern of unexplained vanishings tied to the Willow Inn. Years later, after persistent pressure from victims' families and investigative journalists, law enforcement finally conducted a thorough search of the property. What they discovered inside the walls of the motel sent shockwaves throughout the nation. Hidden compartments contained personal belongings belonging to dozens of former guests, along with chilling photographs documenting their final moments. Autopsies revealed evidence suggesting many had suffered horrific fates under Harold's hands. As news spread, residents of Willow Creek struggled to process how such evil could exist within their seemingly peaceful community. For those brave enough to delve deeper into Harold's history, disturbing patterns emerged, patterns indicating meticulous planning and psychological manipulation. He preyed upon vulnerable individuals, often targeting those traveling alone or with minimal connections to the area. Each victim represented another piece in his twisted puzzle, a collection meant to fuel whatever dark desires drove him. He robbed a bank and lived a double life for 50 years. In a small, quiet town nestled in the heart of America, there was a man named John Carter. He lived an unassuming life as a respected member of his community, known for his kindness and dedication to his family. But beneath this veneer of normalcy lay a secret so profound that it would shock everyone who knew him. John had robbed a bank decades ago and managed to live a double life for 50 years without anyone suspecting a thing. It all began on a chilly autumn morning when the air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the sky was painted with hues of orange and gold. The year? Let's just say it was during a time when rotary phones were still common and televisions were black and white. John, then a young man in his early 20s, found himself in dire financial straits. His wife, Emily, was expecting their first child, and the pressures of providing for a growing family weighed heavily on his shoulders. One evening, after another sleepless night worrying about bills piling up and dreams slipping away, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. The plan was simpler, so he thought. There was a local bank in Springfield, a bustling yet friendly town not far from where he lived. It wasn't one of those grand institutions, but rather a modest building with white columns and glass doors that reflected the surrounding trees. Inside, it smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paper. On the chosen day, John entered the bank wearing a plain brown jacket over his usual attire. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the teller, a kind woman named Martha who always greeted customers with a warm smile. With a deep breath, he slid a note across the counter, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need your cooperation. Pause here. Let the tension build." Martha's eyes widened in shock, but she remained calm, her training kicking in. She discreetly pressed the alarm button under the counter while maintaining eye contact with John. Moments later, the door behind the teller counter swung open, revealing two armed guards. Panic surged through John's veins, but instead of fleeing, he froze. That moment stretched on endlessly, each second feeling like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, the guards hesitated. They weren't sure if John was truly dangerous or just desperate. Seizing the opportunity, John grabbed the cash bag containing several $1,000s and bolted out the door, disappearing into the crowd outside. From that point forward, John became a master of deception. He moved frequently, always staying one step ahead of any potential leads the authorities might have. Over the years, he adopted various aliases and crafted different personas. In some places, he was a hard-working carpenter, in others, a gentle schoolteacher. No matter where he went, he ensured that his new identities were impeccable, blending seamlessly into whatever community he joined. And yet, despite his success at evading capture, guilt gnawed at him constantly. At night, lying beside Emily, who never suspected a thing, he often wondered if he'd done the right thing. But by then, it was too late to turn back. Decades passed, and John grew older. The world around him changed dramatically. Black and white TVs gave way to flat screens, rotary phones were replaced by smartphones, and the internet connected people in ways unimaginable during his youth. Yet, amidst these advancements, John's secret remained intact. Even his children, now grown with families of their own, had no idea about the crime their father had committed. To them, he was simply Dad the man who taught them how to ride bikes, helped with homework, and attended every school play and sports game. Then came the day everything unraveled. A routine investigation into a seemingly unrelated case led detectives to unearth old records pointing toward John. Suspicion mounted as they pieced together evidence linking him to the long unsolved bank robbery. When they finally confronted him, sitting quietly in his living room surrounded by framed photos of his grandchildren, John didn't deny it. Instead, he sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping under the weight of confession. "I've carried this burden for so long," he said softly, his voice tinged with regret. "Pause here. Allow the gravity of his words to sink in." What followed was both heartbreaking and enlightening. The townsfolk, upon learning the truth, struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the criminal acts he'd committed. Some felt betrayed, while others expressed understanding, recognizing the desperation that likely drove him to such drastic measures. Through it all, John faced the consequences of his actions with dignity, accepting responsibility for what he'd done and making amends wherever possible. The pizza delivery that turned into a deadly treasure hunt. It was a quiet evening in the small town of Willow Creek, where life moved at a slow and steady pace. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and children played outside until the streetlights flickered on. But this particular night would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. It started with something as simple as an order from Tony's Pizzeria, a local favorite that had been serving up slices of pepperoni since 1978. Little did anyone know that what seemed like an ordinary pizza delivery would spiral into one of the most chilling events in the town's history. The call came in just after 6:45 p.m., a man ordering 3 large pizzesto with extra cheese and 1 with mushrooms and olives. He gave his address as 423 Maple Lane, a residential street lined with oak trees whose leaves rustled softly in the evening breeze. The voice on the other end sounded calm, polite even. There was nothing unusual about it, no red flags waving wildly in plain sight. Yet somehow there was an unsettling pause when the caller confirmed the total amount due upon delivery. That brief hesitation lingered in the air like smoke refusing to dissipate. At Tony's, the task of delivering the order fell to Jake Miller, a 24-year-old college student working part-time to pay his tuition bills. Jake had lived in Willow Creek all his life and prided himself on knowing every corner of the town by heart. He grabbed the insulated bag, slid the hot boxes inside, and hopped onto his trusty bicycle. The ride to Maple Lane usually took around 10 minutes, but tonight felt different. As he pedaled down the dimly lit streets, the usual hum of crickets seemed quieter than usual, almost drowned out by the distant rumble of thunder rolling across the horizon. When Jake arrived at 423 Maple Lane, everything appeared normal. The house stood 2 stories tall, its white paint slightly faded but still respectable looking. The porch light glowed warmly, casting long shadows across the front yard. Jake parked his bike beside the steps leading up to the door and rang the bell twice. No answer. He waited another moment before knocking firmly against the wooden frame. Still nothing, just silence, thick and oppressive, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. Jake glanced back toward the road, half expecting to see someone approaching, a neighbor maybe, or perhaps the customer himself stepping out from behind the garage. But the street remained eerily empty save for the faint glow of headlights far off in the distance. Shrugging off the unease creeping up his spine, Jake decided to try again. This time he knocked louder, letting his knuckles rap against the wood with enough force to echo through the neighborhood. Again, no response. Something didn't feel right. Maybe the person had stepped out temporarily, leaving the order forgotten. Or maybe they were simply ignoring him. Either way, Jake wasn't going to leave without trying one last time. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number provided during the order. After several rings, the line picked up not with a human voice, but with static so loud it made Jake flinch. Then came a low whisper, barely audible over the crackling noise. "Stay. Stay away." Jake froze, his fingers trembling as he ended the call. His mind raced, searching for explanations. Was this some kind of prank? Had he accidentally dialed the wrong number? Before he could process further, the sound of footsteps echoed from within the house. They were slow, deliberate, each step creaking against the floorboards above. Whoever or whatever was inside, they weren't moving fast, and they certainly weren't coming down to greet him anytime soon. Curiosity got the better of Jake, as it often does in moments like these. Instead of retreating immediately, he walked around the side of the house, hoping to catch a glimpse through the windows. Most were covered with blinds drawn tightly shut, blocking any view of the interior. However, one window near the back offered a sliver of visibility. Peering cautiously inside, Jake saw something that made his stomach drop. In the corner of the room sat a stack of old newspapers, their yellowed pages untouched for years. On top of them lay a single photograph, its edges curled and worn. The image showed a family posing together, a man, woman, and young girl, all smiling brightly under a summer sun. But their faces had been scratched out violently, leaving only jagged lines where smiles once belonged. A cold sweat broke out along Jake's brow. Whatever happened here, it wasn't good. Turning quickly, he sprinted back to his bike, adrenaline pumping through his veins. As he mounted the seat and began pedaling furiously away from the house, the storm clouds overhead finally unleashed their fury. Rain poured down in sheets, drenching him instantly. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the entire street with blinding intensity. For a split second, Jake thought he caught movement in his peripheral vision, a shadow darting between the trees lining Maple Lane, but when he turned to look, there was nothing but darkness. By the time Jake returned to Tony's pizzeria, his clothes were soaked through, and his hands shook uncontrollably. He burst through the doors, startling both owners who were closing up for the night. Between gasps for breath, he recounted everything: the unanswered knocks, the strange whispers, the scratched-out photograph, and the shadowy figure lurking in the rain. At first, they dismissed it as mere paranoia brought on by late-night jitters. But then, Jake mentioned the address, 423 Maple Lane. Their expressions changed instantly, shifting from skepticism to outright dread. "You shouldn't have gone there," Mr. Tony said gravely, lowering his voice so only Jake could hear. "That house hasn't been lived in for over 20 years. Jake stared blankly, unable to comprehend the words fully. 20 years? How was that possible? If no one had occupied the property since then, how did the pizzas get ordered? More importantly, why did the voice on the phone sound so real? The next morning, law enforcement descended upon Maple Lane, cordoning off the area while investigators scoured the premises. What they found inside sent shockwaves rippling throughout Willow Creek and beyond. Hidden beneath layers of dust and cobwebs lay evidence pointing to a series of unsolved disappearances dating back decades. Personal belongings scattered across multiple rooms suggested lives abruptly interrupted, clothing left mid-fold, books open to random pages, photographs propped upright on shelves as if waiting patiently for someone to return. Among the items recovered was a journal belonging to the family depicted in the scratched-out photo. Its entries detailed months of growing fear and desperation, culminating in the killer clown hiding in plain sight. The sun was setting over the quiet suburban streets of Elmwood Heights, casting long shadows across neatly trimmed lawns and white picket fences. It was an ordinary evening in this unassuming American town where life seemed to move at a slower pace. The air